Hi, everyone. Welcome to our event today. We're doing a workshop on executive functioning skills, assessments, training, but our focus is on youth and young adults. We did one previously focused on the professional adult, and now we're shifting into just using this focus because of everything that has been coming up in conversation that I've noticed is this bridge of this age group is not receiving exactly all that they need, whether that's in the workplace or the school system. So if you're here today, you're likely someone that has a young adult or a youth, or you are one yourself, and you're interested in amplifying your executive functioning skills. So first off, like we always go through, I'd like to go over community agreements. So within here, we keep our microphones on mute. If possible, turn your camera on so we have some of that nonverbal communication between us. If you have a question or a comment that's related to this topic, use the chat, and then it will be saved and we'll have time to either discuss it at the end, or if we ever run out, which we often do run out of time, I always follow up with an email or some sort of resource to address those questions. So it's very helpful for that. Little intro to me, if we have not already chatted or you haven't been to one of our workshops or trainings, I am Stina Borth. I am the founder and CEO of Keymaker Services, and we specialize in productivity and neurodiversity. So we guide leaders, professionals, teams, youth, young adults, educators, the list goes on, to unlocking their full potential through awareness of neurodiversity and executive functioning skills. Outside of work, I consider myself a badass fisherwoman. I really enjoy it, and I think I do pretty darn well. I love playing darts, water sports, hiking, dancing. I'm an extremely proud auntie. I think of those lists, something I did over the summer is I hiked Mount Marcy, which is the highest peak in the Adirondacks in New York. That was very difficult and very cleansing, clarifying. So I would definitely recommend it. Our mission for today's event is that we're going to use the executive functioning skills survey tool, and it's a little different than the one that we use in the professional organization environment, to identify areas of executive function that would benefit from further development with a youth or young adult that we are supporting or we are ourselves. Before we get into that, I do want to go over what executive functioning skills are and what definitions we are working with within this community. So they are a set of skills that help folks to plan and problem solve and manage emotions. They influence a person's capacity to plan ahead. So if you have a large project or an event coming up, to meet goals, to self-manage, whether that is their attention or their emotion or even stimuli coming in from the environment, and to follow multi-step directions. So that's working memory, that's that area. If these skills are developed, they actually allow us to stay focused on tasks, and when we're presented with distractions, we can navigate through that. Why are they important? So they're important because I like using the metaphor of they're the glue. So they're the glue for productivity, they're the glue for performance, and for self-management. If an individual is highly intelligent and they're talented, but they don't develop these executive functioning skills, that individual's true ability will not shine. It will not be shown and demonstrated in the work that they produce or the interactions that they engage in. It will not matter unless they manage their task completion, their attention, and their communication, how much they know about engineering, how well they do in a math class, because they won't be able to translate it into a form that is received within whether it's school or work environment. It's also, I always like to refer back to the studies that have been done by Cornell University and Harvard they're studying this all the time of how do we develop these, how do we encourage success in our youth and young adults. Cornell University did a study that identified that the number one predictor of success of a leader was self-awareness. So understanding where somebody is at with these executive functioning skills. How does this work for me and my nervous system? And then Harvard also continues to release studies that show us that the number one predictor of success of individuals is executive functioning skills, and that is above test scores, grades, and socioeconomic status. So they can have a totally ideal setup of of being given everything they need in their environment, access to everything beyond what is, the basic. They can have top grades. They can test amazingly on those entrance exams. And if they don't have executive functioning skills, it's still not going to be enough. So that is our why. That is why we care. So I'm going to throw up a poll out. What is your level of experience with executive functioning skills work? You should see it pop up. Awesome. At least most of us have heard of it. Some of us have done some work with it, whether it's a coach or therapist or education-wise. Some of us have done some self-work on it. All right. So we have about half of us have heard about it. The rest of us have dabbled a little bit in it, and even a few of us have actually done some work within it. It's great to know. All right, so the best way is really to know which area to start with and what to develop is to gather data. So anybody that has worked with me or has spoken with me before know that I am a data geek. It fuels everything. You cannot make decisions if you do not have data to base it on. Otherwise, it's just, well, I feel like, a lot of times what we feel like is not actually what's happening. Like I might say, I feel like I can be out the door in 5 minutes and I just need to just quickly spruce up, I'll be fine. That is not my reality. My reality of my feel like 5 minutes is more like 8 to 10. And I have gathered that information through data, through self-observation. So the best way to identify which of these executive functioning skills are worth your time and your effort is to gather the data through observation checklists, through interval observations, through assessments like the ones that we provide through KeyMaker, and then to find your median. And a lot of times I go towards the median with these scores versus averages because you'll have these far out outliers and then the results don't help. So side note there. We provide several versions of these. For our youth and young adult, we really simplify it. So today we're focusing on using one of these three. So if you are a guardian, when I share the link here in the chat, I would want you to download that and answer as a guardian because you're thinking about your youth or young adult. If you are an adult and you're not overseeing another young adult, you're not working directly with a youth or young adult, then why don't you do the adult self-assessment? And then the youth one is just for you to see. And if you want to take it with you to have your youth complete it and then compare, because a lot of times the perspectives are different from what the individual sees as this is what's impacted me versus those that are supporting them. You're welcome to do that as well. I'd also like to ask a question just so I have how it informs our talk today is what is the age of the youth or young adult that you have in mind while taking and working with these assessments today? Great. So that helps me. Looks like we have a wide range between really like that preteen all the way through up into adulthood. Okay. So within these assessments, you're going to notice that there's mainly 11 areas that we target. And they're self-understanding. So like referencing back to that Cornell study, self-understanding, self-awareness is #1 predictor of success of a leader. And so we always assume that our youth and young adults are going to be able to enter into leadership in some form, and we want to fuel that. So self-awareness, self-understanding, organizational skills, time management, emotion management, behavior management, flexibility. Flexibility is not, can you do a split in what position in yoga? It's your mental flexibility. How do you pivot? When something unexpected comes, can you flex to that and how far? And then how do you develop that? Initiative, getting started, attention, and I'll go into it a little bit later. Attention, there are actually several types of attention that you want to focus on and look at. Working memory, persistence, and then metacognition. When we're working with these assessments, there are a few guidelines that we always try to bring up, and they seem pretty common sense, but pointing them out brings them front of mind. So being honest and creating that space for whoever it is that you're working with. If you have a youth or young adult that you're working directly with, encourage them to be honest. Make sure to ensure that you can answer candidly. There's no right or wrong. There's no punitive response to this. Reflect and analyze. So you want to facilitate that. A lot of times when we're working with a young adult or a youth, they have not developed these self-reflection skills. So you want to model that and facilitate that for your youth or young adult. Engage with members of your support system. So go through and really think, who is it that has direct contact with this person that we're focusing on? Is it a teacher? Is it a therapist? Are there other family members? Are there neighbors, coaches, tutors, anybody that's part of that? You want to get input from them because environment matters. I just got off a call actually with a client that was talking about how at school, the feedback was completely different from what they were seeing in the home environment. And like drastically. And then a lot of times what I'll go into it later, with specifics with percentages, but even perspectives of different individuals interacting with that youth or young adult. Two parents in the same household will answer completely separate and way polar spectrums of the answers and responses of what they're seeing in that individual. Okay, and then last is really most important, make a plan for action. So we've got this data, we put the effort in, we've gathered it, you do nothing with it, obviously the worth decreases. So identify and decide how you're going to develop these areas of need. If you don't know how, ask somebody that's a specialist. I'm a really great resource and I love to chat about it, so reach out with me. Use the insights that you gain to develop actionable strategies. Something that you can do, that your youth or young adult can do, any small step, and then start titrating and tiering it up for improvement. Ready to get started? Throw me a thumbs up, make it fun. If you've got the emojis on there. There's going to be a link in the chat. You're going to download the version that's most relevant to you and what's front of mind right now. So if you're a guardian, I suggest you download the guardian and the youth version so you have that. If you aren't a guardian and maybe you're someone working with a young adult or a youth, you still could do the guardian version. The language is going to be a little bit different, but that's similar. But I would also say download the adult self-assessment. See what you pull out of that. And then once you have that downloaded, take a few minutes, and it shouldn't take you that long. I'd like you to try to go through it and complete at least one. So you have some real life interaction with it as we go through. We're going to throw up a poll. And once you have done that, then answer, say, yes, I'm done, so that I know where we're at. Okay, I'm getting a few good to moves on. So I'm going to transition. You're welcome to keep working. You also, remember, you can send this to me after and finish it up. Okay. So one of the things that I'd like us to look at and take note of is when we send these out, the perspective, like I mentioned, really matters, and who's observing and in what environment. So that's why we want to include everyone that's in that direct support system to give us input. This is an example, and actually this isn't the most drastic example, but you can see how the youth responded to very similar questions, and it ended up being an area that I would say about 60% of, hey, this impacts me 60% of the time on a daily or weekly basis. Parent 1 said 70, parent 2 said 90. I was just reviewing a client actually last week, and we had something between a 25 and like an 85% between two different parents about the same child in the same home. So it's really, really important to think about that and then to bring it together and tease out, why is that? What is it we're specifically thinking about? And even more importantly, there are differences in how each parent translates and responds or observes the youth's abilities. And really also that youth or young adult, what is their perspective? What are they experiencing? This feeds into our buy-in. What are they willing to or want to change? What do they feel like is their experience in their world? And that's going to determine what do we target first? What do we address first in their world? We take these responses, and then what we do is, like I said, we find the median as more of the number that I typically target for prioritizing the areas. But then I also go through and I say, this is based on your responses. This is the results and the prioritization that the assessment is saying. And we want to review it. And then we want to say, you know, actually, I want to move that up. That impacts me the most. Or, you know, attention actually impacts me, and managing my attention impacts me like daily or hourly way more than my self-awareness. I think my self-awareness is not a problem. So we take that through the review and then move the priorities around. We want to look at frequency and intensity. How frequently does this happen, and how intensely is this impacting on their day-to-day experience? All right. Okay. So let's start going through the different areas. So the first one I always like to make sure that we understand is that attention. Attention is one of the key areas that we look at in assessing, and we also do training and instruction in. Attention, when we talk about it, is your ability to maintain focus on relevant information, to filter out those distractions, and then to maintain your concentration over time. So it can involve selective attention, so only focusing on a specific task or information. Sustained attention. Sustained attention is when you're focusing on one thing or doing one task for an extended period of time, kind of like monotasking would be the lame term for it. Alternating attention is when you're shifting from one task or one focus, alternating it to a secondary, and then you redirect your attention back to the primary, the one that you were on, to maintain focus. This is one that we engage with all the time, and we have to master. We have to master for productivity. We have to master for participating in conversations. And what's great about this is there are trainings you can create pathways and to strengthen your alternating attention. Your divided attention is what we would call multitasking. And it is something that everybody needs to get comfortable with for shorter periods of time. I, as a provider practitioner, do not believe in spending a ton of time in this. I don't think anybody really masters multitasking for long periods of time. I think it's worth more of your effort and energy to target that alternating attention and sustained attention, especially for quality of work, for quality of connection in conversation. But I always give training to expose to all three of those. These skills of attention, what it's doing is opening those doors for efficiency, for accuracy. We're enhancing productivity and performance. So basically, we're cognitive control, improving the cognitive control, managing how do we complete tasks, and then navigating through varied environments. A lot of times we have got it down in one environment, and as soon as we switch to another, like we go to a new job, we get promoted, and we move into a new position. This is a new environment, and now we have to retrain ourselves with our attention management. One of the tips that's really easy to incorporate, especially with youth and young adults, are going to be like noise canceling earbuds, earplugs, not just the AirPods. Like I like using, I'm going to see if you can see that, I don't know, like using these loops. I like these loops because you can adjust them. There's 3 different settings. So there's, and you can't, I mean, they don't show up very much either. I mean, these are white, but I can hide them under my hair if I want to. And actually there's different colors and they look like beautiful earrings. I've actually had people ask me about them. A little bit more friendly. You can do these, then these, or these. Just the traditional earplugs. When you're working with adolescents and young adults though, how it looks and how it feels does matter. So picking something that they will engage in and that it's going to be socially accepted and they can use for that is helpful. It also, for us too. So I would use those, and then also attention training, those drills that I'm talking about. Start creating through the drills and the training, those pathways, kind of like thinking of you're going on a hike your instinct is going to go to follow the path that's already established. Even if you see going through the tall grass gets you to the end much more quickly, that's more effort and more work. The brain is the same way. The brain goes through the path of least resistance. And so you want to create those new pathways so that that attention management comes more easily. And that way we do that is through some drills. Next up, we have behavior management. So behavior management is not just, have they behaved poorly or well? It's also about attention. So managing our behavior linked to attention, managing our task completion. And with behavior management, it's about controlling impulses, monitoring our actions, modifying our behavior based on the data that we're receiving back. So what are the social norms of the environment? What are our expectations? While we avoid engagement in behaviors that are counterproductive, that will end up with a negative consequence or negative result, whether that's socially or productivity-wise. This involves thinking before acting, considering the consequences of our behaviors, positive and negative. So consequences we often categorize as only being negative. Consequences actually is a term that is related to positive consequence and negative consequence with behaviors. So adjusting our actions based on that verbal and nonverbal feedback. So remember at the beginning of this, I said, if you can turn your cameras on, please do, because it gives me nonverbal feedback. And that allows me to adjust my behavior, adjust the pace, adjust how I am communicating information out. The verbal or the written communication that I asked for is to respond to the polls so that I can make adjustments in my behavior. So this includes setting clear boundaries, recognizing what are these triggers or antecedents that lead to undesirable behaviors, and then implementing strategies to redirect and modify these actions. So when we are using strategies to redirect and modify, sometimes with our young adults and youth, they need that to be done for them, or we need to do it with them. So I call that co-processing, co-regulating. The co in front means we do it together. I'm modeling it, I'm feeling it, I'm working it through with you so that they can build that strength. It does not mean I do it for them. If I do it for them, they don't gain the skill and they don't gain any strength in the skill to do it independently. So effective behavior management, we know, is essential for personal and professional interactions and for goal attainment. So the tricks that I like to throw out for this is opportunities for isolation and environment management when needed. So yes, collaboration in groups is wonderful, but if we are talking about getting a task done, there are instances where we need to provide opportunities for isolation to do that. That means this is like my blackout time of my work burst. Nobody's going to come in and start asking me questions because I'm in my work burst. It's I am setting up my desk at home to do my homework or in the office in a way that I'm not going to be interrupted, and I'm communicating that out, that this is very sacred time. Creating another option is like a social emotional behavior cycle. That's a whole nother training that I can share out, but if you're interested in that. Emotional management actually has a lot more to do with productivity and efficiency than we think. It's not just about knowing what your emotions are. It's about keeping your brain balanced and healthy and making sure that you are managing that frontal lobe so it doesn't shut down and you can't make decisions and you can't pivot and move forward with progress. So emotion management is the ability to identify and understand and regulate, so manage one's emotional responses. This means both positive and negative emotions. This means maintaining your composure and your clear mind, so keeping that frontal lobe functioning when you're faced with challenging emotional situations. It's allowing you to work through when somebody comes up and there's this sudden drop of file on your desk that kind of puts you into fight or flight. Now you have to work through that. You have to regulate so that you can move on. And what was it I was doing? I was writing that email, and what was I going to say? So that just threw you into a different loop. You want to interrupt that through using emotion management. You're allowing for thoughtful and deliberate actions and reactions rather than those impulsive, emotional driven response. So we're trying to install as much proactive responses, as much intentional responses and management than proactive and fight or flight. Strong emotional management skills are crucial for maintaining interpersonal relationships, overall well-being, and productivity. So tips would be, like I said, co-regulate. So you're managing and you're working through a situation together. You're not telling them what to do. You're asking questions and facilitating the discovery of it. And then you're modeling. So regulating the nervous system, you can use simple things like breath work. I talk about all the time is that I know that these breathing exercises seem sometimes a little silly, but they are probably the number one thing that's going to reset your nervous system the quickest. The Marines use it to bring it down, to keep them focused. So if they do, we know that it works for us too. Box breathing. There's all kinds of them. Tracing your hand, breathing in for a certain count, holding and out for another count. These are great techniques. Using tapping. Tapping is another really good way to reset your nervous system on your collarbone, on your cheekbone. There's different pressure points you can do. Taking breaks between work and study bursts to refuel. I could go on, but a lot of it is giving your nervous system a little bit of nurturing so it can then maintain itself through all of the energy and exercise that it's doing up here for functioning. Flexibility. So remember I said flexibility is all about mental flexibility. It's not about, can you do warrior one? You want to be able to adapt to change. You want you as a young adult to adjust in plans, to be able to consider alternative solutions. And when faced with changing circumstances, that they are able to pivot. It's okay if it's uncomfortable. Discomfort is okay. That just means that we're stretching and building skills. But it does involve being able to open yourself up to new ideas, to switching tasks or perspectives, to modify those plans and being capable of handling that unexpected, because it will happen at some point. So if we can co-navigate through that, if we can co-process through a change of a plan and find the alternative together, rather than we solve it and we just tell them what to do and what's happening, they will gain those skills. They will understand this is the thought pattern that I can follow when changes happen. So this is essential for problem solving. It's essential for responding to a variety of environments, maintaining your productivity, and thinking creatively. So being resilient in that. So my suggestion, when you come to a situation where you're there with your youth or young adult or yourself, and it's a totally unexpected change that's happening. I have a really good example right now. Hurricane Milton is coming off right now. There's no control over that I can do, but I can pivot, right? And I can think of other ways to schedule my week, to do my work, to interact with others. So when something unexpected happens, I'm going to stay present. I'm going to do this along with my youth and young adult. I'm going to feel that emotion that comes up along, and I'm going to feel it with them. And I'm going to say, I can see that you are anxious. Try to see if you can really empathize and feel it. I can feel the anxiety that you're feeling. Put yourself in their shoes. And then model the use of self-talk to reframe. Everybody does self-talk. It's just that as we get older, we internalize it. And we don't always admit that we're doing it. The bummer of that is that our youth and young adult and those that have not learned that skill and have not really mastered it don't have any modeling unless we loop them in and share it out. And so I would encourage you to verbalize that self-talk, to model it in front of them, and then also do it with them, encourage them to self-talk along with you, to reframe and then strategize and move forward. For initiative, this is the ability to really identify and begin projects in a strategic way. You don't need somebody else to come in and tell you and prompt you to get going. You have the skills of lining it up and saying, okay, this is where I start and how I start it, even if there's some avoidance that's naturally happening within you, like this is a task I don't want to do. You have a protocol, you have that strategy in place. So it involves being proactive. You are motivated and you know how to motivate yourself through reinforcers that you've identified through those sources of dopamine and serotonin you know about yourself because you've developed that self-understanding, self-awareness. It's self-directed. And then rather than relying on those external prompts and those guidances, so whether that is a supervisor breaking down and telling this young adult, this is what needs to happen, and then next this needs to happen, next this needs to happen. And I'm not talking about communicating directives. I mean, that's basic. We have to have communication of these are the steps in my expectations. But I'm talking about things that have already been worked through that they need to start building those skills. You as a parent, as a guardian, or you as a teacher telling the student each step of the way how to get started, you model it, and then you can do it together, and then you let them do it. So you're building that along the way so that they start relying on themselves and less on just looking to you for that confidence because they've got it. They have that skill. We need to allow them that space to see that, to demonstrate that. So strong initiative is valuable enhancing your productivity, to innovation, to increasing autonomy and exhibiting leadership qualities. The best tips to start with is to break tasks into subtasks. I think that's across the board for everybody. It doesn't really matter what age. If we don't break our tasks into subtasks, we don't know where to start. So for initiative, we absolutely need that. Another kind of like insider tip here is that when you do it with subtasks, each subtask that you're able to take off, you get a little dopamine hit. And now you have more to work with to keep working to completing the full task. So break it into subtasks, co-work with them. And when you co-work with them, you're the accountability partner. So you are creating that space and that expectation of continuing to work. It's kind of like having your spotter at the gym. You're going to do a few more reps if you've got that trainer there ready to help you as you're starting to wane. It's like sharing in. I'll be in a session and I'll say, okay, I know you can read out loud, but we're going to kind of partner read this because we're going to share in the mental energy and share in the management of our attention here. It's the same thing you're doing here. Use task management tools like task completion plans, like using apps and AIs that will help you do those scheduling and break them down once you have the data about yourself and about your youth and young adult. Metacognition. Metacognition is the awareness and understanding of one's own thought process. I think my favorite definition is more of like simplified version where I go, it's you're thinking about your thinking. So let's not make it more complex than that. I am thinking about my thinking and I'm asking you to think about yours. So it involves being aware of how one learns. How do I think? How do I problem solve? Why do I think that? So it's asking all of those questions. If you can ask them and lead them into that discovery, you're inviting them to develop their metacognition skills, and you're also exercising that muscle yourself. So this allows an individual to regulate and optimize their cognitive strategies, to really think about what it is that goes on in their mind and why it does. And so rather than just letting it happen, to live intentionally, to really use their mental energy intentionally and towards the goals that they're seeking. It enables them to assess their comprehension, to identify the areas of improvement, to really adjust their approach, and thus, because they adjust their approach and they're looking at and they're self-monitoring, they're enhancing their performance. So we know that these strong metacognitive skills are crucial for effective learning and critical thinking. So before, one of the tips that I would like to bring up is asking questions before, during, and then after, while you're monitoring progress. It's like the how, why, what did you do? And try to just hold that space and let them answer. And if they're struggling, you then can give an example from yourself and then ask them if that relates or if they have something similar. Co-reflect. So you're reflecting together. You don't tell them exactly what you've seen. You can lead with some examples, give them some starts, but really try to have them be an active part of it. Seek feedback, whether that is from them or from those around. Again, loop in those support system members. And then log and journal your observations. So there's that data piece. Keep the data so you can go back and say, hey, a month ago, this is what was happening. Or the last time we did an activity like this, or we did a project like this together, this is what we gained or what I experienced. So that you can see how that evolves over time. And if what you're doing is actually making you stronger in the area, or if it's not making an impact, then if it's not, then you need to toss that, move on to the next one and try something else. Organizational skills. It's kind of like what it sounds like. We need to create and maintain order. It's physical space, it's digital environments. So what does your desktop look like? How many tabs do you have open? How many windows? How are they organized? Do you have folders set up? As well as your physical environment, what is going on all around you that really impacts it? What is in your path? So believe it or not, if from the desk to the bathroom is a really common one that either folks are trying to get something done will avoid going to the bathroom because they know once they get up, something's going to be in that path that's going to get them off track and they're not going to be able to maintain focus. So if you can be really intentional about how you set up that environment, you organize that so there's nothing that pulls away and or it's shorter, then we have the ability to take care of our bodily functions without distractions and organize it in something that supports the nervous system better. This includes belongings, files, tasks, developing strategies around tracking and retrieving information. It allows for creation and maintenance of these structured environments. So like, where are you working? Where are you living? Where are you resting? You establish clear boundaries and develop detailed plans to facilitate that smooth and efficient workflow. And that smooth and efficient workflow is also when you get home, where do you put your things? How do you transition into dinner? How do you transition to bed? How are you supporting yourself so that you can get the rest and rejuvenation you need to do the work the next day too? At the end of each day, prioritize your tasks for the next before the end of the day. If there's nothing else you do, and it will take you maybe 15 minutes, just try to have something started where I know I'm starting here right away in the morning, because if you come back the next day, it is going to take you double time to figure that out. So chunk that off at the end of the day. And even if you're run to like, hey, it's 5 o'clock, I got to get out of here, I'm done. Take that 5 minutes, give yourself at least a starter so you have something to take off from. Let's see. And then a workplace. I think I already talked about that. So the workplace, consistent, be really intentional about your workplace and that it is consistent and it supports work completion. So you're not surrounding yourself in a high traffic area that you're going to be distracted by others. If you're have visual distractions, maybe the window isn't the greatest for you to be next to. And then monitoring the auditory stimuli too. But definitely keeping it consistent. The brain and the body notices. Wait, I'm over here. I don't quite know how to get in here. I was at the kitchen table, or I was at this desk, or I was at that table. The body and the brain likes routine. It gives it a sense of safety and security. It actually takes a lot of anxiety out. There was a study that went back and said people will go rewatch sitcoms over and over and they've seen again because it does soothe our anxiety because we know what's coming, what's happening. So use that with work. Persistence. It's the ability to maintain a consistent effort and to focus. So while you're continuing to work towards a goal, you are working around obstacles, setbacks. There's lack of immediate reward. A lot of times we have long projects. It involves staying focused and overcoming distractions. We are practicing resilience in the face of the worst one, boredom. Like something that is boring is so hard to engage with, and it's even harder for our youth and young adults because they have not worked through this as often. If something's difficult, that's the runner-up for that. And then adapting strategies as needed to achieve these long-term goals. So remembering that just because you did this for the last one, sometimes it's the same thing. It's like you got to switch it up for it to be effective. You got to have a plan 1, plan 2. And when I talk about facilitating work bursts, you have your 2 tasks and you can switch them. And sometimes that's just enough to revive you to keep going. Persistence is the key factor in productivity and successful task completion. Strategies that I like to include and talk about are engaging with those rewards after the completion of each task or subtask. We use assessments that identify a source of dopamine or serotonin. So that's that natural reward chemical centers in your brain. So you get that feeling, and also double bonus, dopamine is the chemical that supports focus, to help us know what are impactful rewards and reinforcers for persistence. I have a really great example I was working with a client, a young adult client who was, the attempt was to reinforce and motivate the completion of tasks in a monetary way. And we did this assessment, and he does not respond to that whatsoever. He responds to relational praise. So really it's from receiving interaction or of any kind from a peer or someone of authority. The monetary was it scored very, very low, like 10%. And that was the number one strategy that was being used to try to motivate him. So total mismatch. We want to use those assessments to identify what works for different folks. Self-understanding. So self-understanding is our ability to recognize one's own strengths, weaknesses, how do they impact our own actions, and how is it impacting others in relation. So we're using our awareness of cognitive processes. How does my brain work? Our emotional responses, our thought patterns, and then our behavioral patterns. We're looking at our personal experiences. Our values are extremely impactful here, and our beliefs, and how does that shape our actions and reactions. So when we are working through that with a youth or young adult, we need to ask them not what we have been trying to or may have passed on and installed in them. There's a difference. And so really discovery, we're facilitating discovery here so that we understand where they are at, what are they motivated by, what is their experience. So individuals with strong self-understanding, they can accurately assess their abilities. They seek support that's beneficial to them. They modify their behavior. They base that behavior modification on from feedback and self-observation. So here, data-driven, right, to inform. Data-driven that's also not from somebody else, data of themselves is important. So they're able to reflect on their internal processes and evaluate what personal growth have I experienced? What are my decision-making patterns? And am I able to make more informed choices and maintain these relationships, interpersonal relationships, work, school, family, successfully? And if I don't feel like that, what are my resources to make those shifts and changes? So really identifying the why and the source. Tips for this would be logging self-observations. Some people do this through journaling. Some people do through checklists, and then seeking feedback regularly. If you're trying to facilitate this for a youth or young adult, I try to do it as quickly and briefly and intentionally as possible. So checklists are wonderful because you can go, hey, it's Sunday. Let's look at what your experience is with how long do you think that this homework took you? How many job applications have you gone through? What feedback have you sought out? Check, check, check. And even yes or no, did you do this? Did you not do this? When did you do this? So really logging and getting some feedback. Time management. Time management is a big one across the board. You want to plan, it's your ability to plan, to allocate time, to prioritize, and to manage how you spend that time. So it involves accurately estimating the task duration. So this is goes back to your time processing within your nervous system. And that's another data collection that's really important to take to understand when you feel 5 minutes has 5 minutes actually passed for this type of task? And then use that to inform how you are scheduling yourself for task completion. This is something that you can really break down and teach explicitly to a youth and young adult, and you can model it yourself. It's a lifesaver of not wasting that energy on something like as if you're pedaling with the chain off the bike. So maximize your productivity through time awareness by gathering that data and then using that to fuel your time management skills. So my tip would be, we do have a whole resource on our site that's designed for this. It's called Plan Your Day Task Prioritization Guide. It should be simple enough that if you have a youth or young adult you want to work through it with, that you could be able to do that. I know we need to wrap up a bit. Working memory is really, can I hold that information long enough to apply it? And working memory is something that we all use. It's different than long or short, but what you want to do for this in a youth or young adult environment is you want to be able to play games. that engage that working memory. So like dominoes, pattern games, card games, any of those, they actually are very helpful for working memory. And then find those supports so you don't have to rely on the working memory if it's not the strength area. All right. And I just wanted to throw a shout out too for our adult professionals. We do have the source. We partnered with Psychometrics for a similar assessment, and you can click on the link and take that. Can share that out. I think it's in the chat. If it's not, please do email and ask for that. And then again, for the results from this one on the youth and young adults focused, for yourself or for your youth and young adult with the guardian, the best it would be just to book a one-on-one call and email me the PDF that you completed. And that way I can look at it ahead of time and give you kind of an overall, this is what we're seeing for the pattern just initially for your baseline. You can use this then to pull out any strategies that are individualized to you and your situation. That would be the biggest bang for the energy and effort that you want to implement right now with your youth or young adult. And then if you, within that call, you're going to use the free EF or the EF. So I know that it's executive functioning that you're targeting and that you would like to meet about. There's also on the next page, there's a QR code for feedback on today. And using the word inclusion, that's going to tell me that this is from today. How did it feel? How can we improve? That's that self-awareness and self-monitoring I like to practice when I'm teaching. And then the best ways to contact me if you want to have a further discussion or you want more on these results is through LinkedIn. You can schedule a meeting as well. There'll be a link provided in the chat. I think it's probably been thrown out there a couple times, along with an email and phone. All of those are, you'll get in touch with me. I will say though, the way things are going right now, very busy season as we're entering soon holidays, is to just click that link and just hold some space on my calendar. Let me see. Okay. And then I think there was a question just about resources. We absolutely will send out resource. You'll get some follow-up emails that'll give you anything that you've missed. I can send out slides, but I also trying to think. I don't think there's anything else that was thrown into the chat question-wise. I'm out of breath. Are you all breathing? Oofta. That was a lot to go through. All right. Anything else? Okay. Well, I hope you all are having a great week. If you're in the path of the storm, I hope you're staying safe. And follow up with any questions, please use these resources. And look for the next training we do. Bye.